if you don't get ahead of yourself and focus on the wrong things and sort of get stars in your eyes and think that it's just about how much money you've raised and how big you're going to be and how much you're worth and what your valuation is. Like, those things have nothing to do with making great products.
This episode of Book Overflow is brought to you by Tusk. Hey there, welcome to Book Overflow, the podcast for software engineers by software engineers, where every week we read one of the best technical books in the world in an effort to improve our craft. I'm Carter Morgan, and I'm joined here, as always, by my co-host, Nathan Toups. How are you doing, Nathan?
Doing great. Hey, everybody.
Well, we have a very special episode of Book Overflow for you guys this week. We have Jason Fried, author of ReWork and CEO of 37Signals, on the podcast. We loved ReWork. This is one we've been wanting to get on the books for a while, and we are so pleased to have Jason join us. Nathan, you want to give us, our audience, a bit of a heads up, a bit of an overview of what they're going to hear today?
It's awesome. We were actually just talking about how difficult it's going to be to pick the right intro clip because there's just so many good little nuggets of wisdom through this. It was a fun conversation. Jason's just awesome. And so I think you're going to really enjoy this episode.
Yeah, really cool to have him on the podcast. Really nice of him to stop by. Enjoy this interview, listeners. This is Jason Fried as he reflects on his book, ReWork. Well, thanks for joining us, Jason. We're so excited to have you on the podcast.
Good to be here.
Well, tell us a bit about ReWork, written in 2010. Maybe you could describe the computer science or software engineering industry at the time and what sort of motivated you to write the book.
Yeah, so ReWork, I wouldn't actually call it a technology book at all. Really.
I guess that's true, right?
Even though we're a software company, but we really wrote this book, we wrote the book to share our point of view on how a business should be and could be run, like our size kind of business. We're not trying to tell Apple how to run their business, but there's a lot of businesses that are our size, smaller companies. And we felt like a lot of these companies were trying to run like big companies. They're small companies trying to run like big companies. We're like, you don't have to do it that way. There's a much, much better way, we think, and a much simpler way and a much more straightforward way to run a business. And this is the way we've been running our business for the past 10-ish years. And we felt like we had enough, let's say, enough experience at this point to step out and go, here's how we've done it. I don't think we could have written this book 2 years in. Like, we didn't have enough time, but 10 years in was enough. And we put all our lessons in it, basically our recipes, as we like to think of it. It's really a cookbook, actually, is how we've always thought about it. And this is how we make our recipes, essentially, and make our products and make our company, make our culture, and all the things that we do. And in general, our feeling is let's share as much as we possibly can. There's nothing proprietary here. It's better that everybody knows what we're doing and whatever someone else is doing. I'd love to hear what they're doing. And I think it's just it's a good pattern to share as much as you can. And a book made sense at the time. We'd actually written a lot of the book already sort of kind of publicly in blog posts scattered in different places and here and there and whatever. So the book was a chance to pull it all together, kind of rewrite it in a single voice and put it out there for everybody.
We called it, when we read it, a book of Proverbs, because that's kind of how it reads, right?
Yeah, short essays.
Right. We mean that in the best possible way. That's what made it such a delight to read. And I think I listened to a lot of it on audio, and it's a great audio book as well. You obviously have a very open attitude towards sharing this, right? And I feel like some companies or some leaders might kind of view that as their secret sauce, and that this is your competitive advantage in building a great company. You guys obviously don't feel that way. Why? What prompts you to be so open with all of that?
Well, because I find most of the rest of it to be kind of bullshit, basically. This idea that everyone has this secret sauce and proprietary knowledge, and the way they run their business is so unique and exceptional that, if they were to tell anybody else, someone else would put them out of business. It's like, what are you talking about? So our feeling is business is actually pretty simple at the end of the day, and should be pretty simple. And the more complicated you make it, the worse you're making it. And it just feels like, take the lid off it and just share it all. Why not? And what's very interesting about the reaction we got to the book was that, first of all, some people thought it sucked and thought we're crazy and the whole thing. Fine, right? Good. A lot of people were like, I've been running my business like this for years, and everyone told me I was crazy. It's really nice to hear that there's someone else running a business like this. So it's an affirmation in many ways. And I just think it's important for people not to feel like they're crazy to run a simpler business and to run a more straightforward, direct business than to do it sort of the old-fashioned way, let's say. So yeah, I don't buy that like there's any business formation or like way to run something that is so proprietary and so advantageous that giving it away would hurt you in any way, shape, or form. I just don't buy it. And maybe there is something like that. I don't know. What's interesting is that, a lot of the great companies you hear today, like they're very, very open about talking about how they work and what they're doing. And NVIDIA has been pretty popular around, our last few years, you might say. And their leader, of course, is like shares all sorts of stuff about how he works and how many direct reports he has. And what is someone going to build better chips because of that? Like, no, So I just think it makes sense to share. And I just don't buy. I mean, we don't have patents on software. Like, I don't believe in software patents. I don't believe in trying to protect really anything. I just think you're better off sharing it and doing the best work you can.
I loved the doubling down. I think I originally read this book in 2012. I was running an IT consulting business at the time, and it was funny to see a lot of the hand wringing around how to run that business. And it gave me a lot of permission to say, you know what, I'm gonna do this on my own terms and like really stake my ground as far as like what my perspective was. And I really appreciated that influence on me at the time. And so yeah, going from signal versus noise and then reading this book, I was like, yeah, this is like it just like, kind of got me jazzed.
And that's what I wanted people to be excited about running a small business. I think a lot of people run a small business have this sense of like they're inferior, like they're small, and therefore like they're not where they want to be or not big enough yet or whatever. All those insecurities. I understand that. Like I remember when I was first on my own, just one person, I used to refer to the business as we, and then eventually like, you know what, it's just me. So I'm going to call it I. And like you finally get to this point where like you're confident in that. But a lot of small business owners just aren't confident in where they're at or whatever, and they think it's a stepping stone to something else, and maybe it could be, but it's also a wonderful destination in itself. And I think it's just important for people to recognize that they can run a small business in a different way and feel very good about where they're at, and not feel like they don't have what they need or they are not whoever they think they should be or whatever. You're great who you are, and here's a nice way to make it work, so you don't like just kill yourself trying to make things complicated.
Yep. You guys were way ahead of the game on remote work. I mean, this book is written in 2010, making the case for remote work, right? And then obviously the pandemic 9 years later kind of ushers it in. Yeah. And now there's still more remote work than there was in, say, 2018, but there's some companies feel very strongly against it. I guess what motivated you to feel so strongly about it back then in 2010, and where do you stand on it now, 15 years later?
Yeah, and we wrote another book called Remote, which is all about this actually, like in full detail. So I just didn't know any other way. I mean, when I first started the business, there was actually 3 of us locally in Chicago, or 4 of us ultimately, but I had 2 other co-founders. And then David came along, a few years later, and David was living in Denmark, and we started working together, and it was fine. It wasn't like I can't work with you; you're in Denmark. It was like, oh, you're smart. Like I need some help. You're willing to help. We get along, let's work, like why wouldn't we? It was kind of like, what does the distance have to do with anything? Actually, you're doing code, I'm doing design. Like these are things we could share with each other over the internet. Like, and then our next hire was a guy named Jameis who lived in Utah, I believe, Utah or Idaho. I think he was in Utah at the time, and that worked out well too. And it just became like, well, let's just find the best people we can. Like, who cares where people are? We can get together in person if we need to a few times a year, whatever it might be. But let's just find the best people. And the chances of the best people being within, 30 miles of wherever you are, like it's pretty slim. The best people are just there. They happen to be there. There's great people everywhere, including nearby. And we hired some people nearby, and we also hired some people far away. It just didn't feel like it was a big deal. And I think it was sort of we're kind of native in that way. It wasn't like we had 60 people locally and then we decided to, go remote and start to hire the next 5 people remotely. Like that's a very hard thing to do, frankly. But from our 5, 6, 7, whatever was remote, and it just worked out great, and we just didn't see any reason not to continue to do it that way. Today we actually, at that time, we had an office, and we had multiple offices in Chicago over the years. Our 10-year lease of our main office ended in 2020, and so we decided not to renew. The pandemic was happening as well, and so we've been fully remote from then on, and will always be remote. We actually technically just started another office in Chicago for like 3 people because we were trying to get some government work, and you actually need a physical local address to
really?
to even, like, you can't have a PO box, you can't be a virtual company, you need to actually have a physical address. So we opened up a tiny little office for 2 people to meet that criteria. And that happens to be in Chicago again, because we have a few employees there and a few people work there from time to time. But essentially, we are still a 100% remote company across, I don't know, somewhere between, I haven't counted recently, but 14 to 16 countries, I think, and multiple continents. And it's been great. So, but I should also say, like, I'm fully in favor of it, obviously. I also understand if it doesn't work for a certain company, you shouldn't do it. Don't force it on anybody. But it should be an option, and I think it's worthwhile. But there's also types of businesses where it doesn't work at all. Obviously, if you need to really physically be there, if you're a factory or whatever. But I don't think creative work, there's always been this thing, well, what about the spontaneity of running into someone in the hallway and whatever? It's like, yeah, there's probably something to that. But there's also a lot of downside to be around the same people all the time. And so you can't just look at those occasional moments that would make the whole thing worth it. I think you got to look at the whole thing. And we found that there's plenty of spontaneity virtually as well. And as long as we see ourselves, or we all see each other, I should say, about twice a year for 2 weeks, the total in a year, that's enough for everybody to just get to know each other again, see faces, share meals, smile, laugh together, and then go back to our home offices essentially and work from there.
I was surprised. I used to work for Shopify, and they were all remote, and did the meetups like once a quarter. And whenever I met someone in person, it wasn't like, oh, and now I finally know you because I see you face to face. I'm like, no, like you seem like the same guy that I'm talking to on Zoom or Slack or whatever every day. Like I think the depth of connection you can make remote and the depths of working connection you can make remote is underestimated by a lot of people.
It's plenty. I do think in-person time really helps to cement those and sort of complete the picture. But I fully agree with you. Like, it's totally fine, and more fine than it's ever been. I mean, like, we all have high definition cameras, and video conferencing is very simple, and audio quality is great. And, it's enough. It's enough in between the gaps where you don't see each other. I certainly think so.
Yep. I went fully remote in 2017, partially inspired by the book remote. And I've hopped company to company working on different projects, and it was really interesting to see the companies that it was in their DNA versus the ones who kind of like were forced into it. And I was like, oh man, this is really a bad setup if you don't like this. This is really bad. But I also loved the autonomy in the management style that is required of the type of folks who can handle remote work, right? Like you have to be sort of self-motivated and, able to like pick up stuff and collaborate in these alternative tools. And it's like putting the cart before the horse, I guess, is that remote work doesn't fix problems. Remote work's just a way to structure a set of problem solving, I guess.
Yes, I think that's all very true. And I also think the other thing it can give you, because it can be worse, by the way, obviously it can be worse if companies just try to simulate local work remotely.
Ooh.
So my feeling is that remote work is like an operating system. Local work is an operating system. These are different operating systems optimized for different things. If you try to just simulate local remotely by just being on Zoom all day long, like, that sucks. It's worse than being in physical meetings all day long. It's way worse because you're sitting still staring into a camera like all day. That sucks compared to like at least yakking it up and hanging out with some people, right? So I think it's a different way of working. It's a very, very different approach to working. It's a lot more autonomy, a lot more agency independently, far fewer meetings and conversations, when you have them, they should be between like 1 or 2 people, not like 9 people around filling up the screen I'm blanking. What was the name of that show in the 70s?
Brady Bunch?
The Brady Bunch.
The Brady Bunch screen, right? So you don't want that. Like, that's not, in my opinion, the way to do it. So you do have to work differently, and it can be really, really horrible if you try to simulate local working.
You know that feeling when your PR gets blocked because test coverage has dropped, or when a simple logic change breaks something unexpected in production? As senior engineers, we all know unit tests are critical, but let's be honest, writing comprehensive test suites is time-consuming, and keeping up with coverage while shipping features fast is a constant battle. That's where Tusk comes in. Tusk is an AI dev tool that generates and runs unit tests right in your CI pipeline. It reads your full code base for context, understands your business logic, and creates verified test cases, including those edge cases you might miss. Companies like Deep Learning AI and Team FeePay are using Tusk to increase their test coverage by 30% in just 3 weeks, while preventing edge case bugs in 43% of their PRs. Tusk is creating a future where you ship faster and safer, while focusing on solving interesting architecture challenges as opposed to writing repetitive test boilerplate. You can try Tusk free for 7 days at usetusk.ai. Use promo code Book Overflow for 25% off for 3 months after your trial. Tusk, because your time is better spent solving hard technical problems, not writing unit tests to cover all edge cases.
Working.
So, taking that idea of struggling, have you gone back and looked at any of the principles that you have in ReWork and go, oh, actually, we struggle with this? Like, is there anything in there that you kind of come back to from time to time?
I mean, there's a lot of things that we. It's funny, like, we try to do something a little bit differently, and then it pulls it, like, reality pulls us back to why are we trying to do that? And I think one of these things is, like, on the technical side specifically, we've with the way, this is a weird analogy, or not analogy, but a parallel, I guess, is that we went on this trend of, like, hosting our marketing websites and these very complex CMS systems and multiple layers of this and that before, like, the HTML and the CSS is served up, and building stuff on the server and sending it out, like, just a lot of complexity in our setup. And we've gone back to, like, a much simpler setup these days. And it just feels better to have less or fewer layers between things, to have less abstraction, which is a fundamental story behind ReWork, is, like, try to get rid of these abstractions. All the things that aren't real, but try to represent real, trying to, like, layer all that stuff back. So we pulled back on the tech side in many ways. We pulled back. We actually, for a while, tried to grow the company a little bit more than I think we were comfortable with, because we felt like, well, this is maybe what we should do now. And no, we brought it back. We have 60 people now. We got into mid 80s at some point. We also had a time where we try to hire some more managers, which is not something we advocate typically doing. We hired a few managers. They're great people, but it just didn't work here. And so we've pared back on that as well. So every time we've tried to sort of, like, stray, we've just realized that was a worthwhile experiment. I don't, like, regret those experiments, but, like, it's time to come back to the fundamentals and to the basics. And so there's a bunch of small examples of that all the time. Also, I'd say writing and long form writing, like, for a while, I think we were doing a little bit more chatting than we should have been, and now we're back to longer form writing, which is nice. So it's good to go out and explore and pioneer and try some other stuff, and then figure out what works for you, and come back to it, or stick with the new thing if it's better. Some of the things we wrote another book called It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work, which is sort of like the spiritual follow-up to ReWork. And there's some stuff in there that's a little bit different than the stuff in ReWork. And I can't remember exactly what it is offhand now, but I remember when we're writing it, I'm like, that's not exactly what we would have said back in 2010, but we're a different company now, and it's good to grow as well. But still, like, core principles remain, I would say.
So, quick follow-up, which is the too much chatting versus long form. Could you elaborate on that a little bit? That sounds really interesting.
Yeah. So, a lot of companies run on chat, like run on Slack or whatever other products you might use for that. And I think that that's generally, like, a pretty terrible idea. I think that chat is handy occasionally for some real-time back and forth when necessary, but it should not be the go-to primary method of communication, which is what most companies run on these days. And our feeling is that you should actually be way more asynchronous. So write things up in long form, think them through, publish them. We use Basecamp to do that. You can use whatever you want, but publish it in a place with a tool that's about long form writing. Like you don't want to write a big thing and post it in a Slack message. It's like that's the problem. Like the medium matters. And if you're writing on a conveyor belt, writing long or short, it's still a conveyor belt and it's moving. And when it gets out of view, it's like gone. And so there's this tendency for everyone to react fast because they only have a short period of time before it's like gone. So we tend to write things where things are stable and they stay. And then you can write and respond and get back to people when you have a chance. Not like immediately when they said it, but like maybe tomorrow morning or the next day or whatever it might be. And you can respond in kind. If someone took the time to write a long form thing, you can respond with a long form comment if you want. And this is sort of the way we communicate. And from time to time, we've gone a little bit too far in the chat world, and we realize that like all the negative sides of it, we're reminded of those things, and we come back to writing things up in long form. We primarily use chat for just social stuff at work now. So almost no decisions are made in chat at work, like major decisions, or discussed in chat. There's sometimes some back and forth on a product decision or an idea or something's wrong, or everyone will jump in there because it's a good place to do that. But it's not where we communicate things. It's not where we announce things. It's not where we tell people about things. It's not where we share work necessarily. Those are all written in long form posts, typically in Basecamp. Basecamp has chat built in as well, but it's like a thing, not the thing. And that's the main difference.
This book had not only my favorite piece of advice, like work advice ever, but I've frequently cited it, even before reading this book, as my favorite relationship advice ever, which is go to sleep.
Yeah. Yes.
I have 4 kids, and
yeah.
I mentioned the podcast. Like, there's going to come a time in your relationship after a kid is born, you're going to be like, wow, something's wrong, and the magic's gone, and we seem to be on edge with each other a lot. I'm like, nothing's wrong. You need to sleep. Like, go take a nap.
Yeah, 100%.
And there's a lot, I think, there's a lot of that in this book about kind of like against workaholism, pro rest. Do you think, but then there's like a dichotomy in the software engineering world where you have a lot of software engineers who are more like, it's a stable career. I like to work at my own pace. I like working on interesting things, but I kind of like the autonomy afforded to me as a software engineer. But then you have kind of the other end, which is the people that really like being software engineers because it's, you can hustle, you can move really quickly, you can work at startups that can grow to $1 billion, right? I mean, do you think that ReWork is for that half of people too, who are really wanting to hustle and move and scale? Or is it kind of like you were saying, is this really targeted for people who don't necessarily want to, I guess, like if you're working at Cursor or something that's growing really, really fast, does ReWork still have a lot of valuable lessons for you? Or is it kind of incompatible with that VC funded model that you guys have spoken against?
I mean, I think there's some things in there that are valuable regardless. But, if you're just kind of running as fast as you can all the time, I don't think you should pay attention to what anyone's doing and just do your own thing. Like if that's what you want to do, if that's what you think it's going to take, which is just like, always on, you're going to be scrappy and that's great. You should just be totally scrappy and whatever. So, and it's weird because I write these books and I also believe like, don't listen to anybody because you sort of need to find your own way and figure out what works well for you. But it's good to know what other people do because you might pull a few things in, and I think that there's a variety of topics. I mean, I should pull a copy out here since we're talking about it, and like we can look at some of these things, right? But I would say, for example, like, if I'm looking at the back cover here, like planning is guessing is a good example. Like if you're Cursor, you can't think about 5 years from now. Like, why would you spend any time thinking about that? You don't even know, you're on the vanguard, you're on the cutting edge of whatever. Like this is all about now. Focus on now. Stop worrying about what things might look like in 2 years, right? I mean, I don't know again what they're doing, but obviously like fire the workaholics, probably not appropriate for them perhaps. Although maybe it should be, I don't know. picking a fight is an example of something that might be a really good idea for them, actually. So it just all depends. I'd say, it's good to sort of soak yourself in a lot of different ideas, but at the end of the day, don't follow a book or the way someone else does something. Figure your own way out, but be influenced perhaps by some of the ideas in some of these things. So, I don't know. Also, the other thing I would say is, like, at the end of the day, like, companies and people, there's no superhuman people. So if you don't sleep and if you work 12 hours a day, you're going to suck pretty soon. I don't care who you're working for. I don't care how exciting the whatever field you're in is. Like, there's just some limits to human performance. And if you really want to be good at what you do, like, you need to get some sleep, you need to get some rest. Working all the time is not a good idea. So this idea that, like, some things can wait till 9 a.m. the next morning versus 9 p.m. right now, like, I think that's good advice generally, even though some of these companies are going to be running faster than others.
If you couldn't work on 37 Signals anymore and you were trying to scratch an itch, do you know what kind of problem you would work on these days?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. Like, I if I had other ideas, I'd be working on those. Like, I think that like, you should be working on the best ideas you have, basically. And so right now we're building a new product called Fizzy, which is like a bug tracker idea issue kind of thing. It's a little bit of a hybrid thing, which is why it's a little bit hard to categorize. Working on a brand new version of Basecamp 5. Working on another book. And then also probably going to start working on another product next year. We have an idea for something. I don't know if we're going to do it or not, but we probably will. And these are the things that I have in my head and David has in his head that we're going to be doing. There's not like a long list of things we'd rather be doing. If there was, or if there is, you probably shouldn't be doing what you're doing, and you should be doing those things instead. And that's kind of how we've always looked at it. So beyond, like, even beyond the question specifically, like, if I wasn't doing this anymore, like if we sold the business or something like that, I don't think I'd ever start another business again. I don't really wouldn't really want to. I think, like, we have the right team. Our timing has been good. We've had a great run. We're still doing great stuff. Business is great. Like, we'll ride this until it can't be ridden anymore, or until we don't want to do it anymore. And then I think, like, for me at least, I would be done with this stuff. I wouldn't, like, go away unless some new idea came up, but I doubt it. I wouldn't go away and think about software anymore. Like, I don't really want to think about software after I'm done with software. Is kind of how I think of it. So I don't have like a long list of 10 or 15 things. I mean, the unfortunate thing is, like, everywhere I look, I'm like, oh my God, I could make this so much better. Or like, oh my God, this is like, why is this like such a pain in the ass to use? Like, so there's some of that will probably always be cursed with, let's say. But there's not like a bunch of ideas that we have in our back pocket that if we only had 100 more people, we could do them all at the same time. Yeah. But I will say that, like, there's always a new idea. I mean, there's always something that comes up. But certain things have to rise to a level of, like, we're actually going to do this, versus, like, we can think about how cool it would be to do this. And you only really get a few of those here and there. And also, I would say the other thing is, like, we've had one massive hit. Basecamp's a massive hit. And we've had a few big hits, Hey, High Rise, and then a bunch of stuff that didn't go anywhere. Really. Some stuff was maybe too early. Some stuff was not good enough. Some stuff just didn't meet product market fit or whatever. It's hard enough to do one thing well. So the idea of thinking about a bunch of stuff you might want to do down the road, like, and taking your eye off the ball, which is like, I'm trying to build some stuff right now. It's hard enough to build anything right now. So that's why I kind of want to make sure I'm not too focused on other things that I haven't decided to do yet.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So I originally read the book in 2012, and then we reread for the podcast. And what was interesting was how it feels like the industry has changed, because some of the things that felt radical in the book when I first read it are like obvious ways that people do, at least a lot of the startups and companies and smaller solopreneur kind of companies do things. I just thought that has to be surreal to like have this sort of contrarian hot take, and then it's not. Some of this isn't contrarian anymore, really.
Right. Well, what's funny is like, I mean, in my opinion, like people I know have called us contrarian or whatever. I think we're just like business 101. Like we are like the most basic thing there is. Like make more money than you spend. Don't do stupid shit that's like going to put you out of business in 2 years because you blew it all on some whatever. Don't hire more people than you can afford. Be reasonable, like be fair to your customers, treat your employees well, be clear in how you communicate. Don't make promises that you can't keep. Don't use sensational language, like just be an honest business that tries to put a good product out there in the world, takes really good care of people, charges fair prices, and doesn't get ahead of its skis or get out over its skis. Like it's the same stuff that you would hope the local pizza shop would be doing, that you like their place and you don't want them to go out of business. They're not going to like try to win on volume and like lose money on every pizza they sell, but eventually maybe they'll like, no, they're going to like, here's our costs, here's our ingredients, here's our costs, like here's our labor, here's our rent. Like, how do we make pizzas at a profit? Like this is basic stuff. And we are that kind of business, cash basis, simple business. There's no fanciness here at all. And so it's funny that while we're seen as outliers in some ways in maybe the tech world, like the tech world's like a tiny world. Like all things, like out of all the businesses in the world, we're far more like most businesses in the world than we are like, than any other business. So I think actually we're pretty common, and not that different than most.
Something I was really struck by in the book is the section making a dent in the universe. I've actually got it pulled up and highlighted here. I'll read it for our listeners. To do great work, you need to feel that you're making a difference, that you're putting a meaningful dent in the universe, that you're part of something important. That doesn't mean you need to find the cure for cancer. It just means that your efforts need to feel valuable. You want your customers to say, this makes my life better. You want to feel that if you stop doing what you do, people would notice. This is something I've been thinking about a lot. I've kind of, up until this point, done kind of like exclusively big tech. Like I haven't really been at a company that's had like fewer than 5,000 employees. And you learn a lot, and the scale is really interesting, and the pay is very, very good. But I kind of struggle with that, this feeling that like, if I left, I feel like they would find another person to kind of keep doing my job. And moreover, if our product disappeared, I'm not even sure how much the universe would notice. And so left big tech. I'm at a startup these days. And again, this startup is not curing cancer, but I do feel kind of meaningfully more fulfilled by the work. At the same time, it pays a lot less. This is just the classic golden handcuffs problem, but I imagine you're at a point in your career now where those incentives are pretty aligned, where you can work on what you like and it also pays enough for you to enjoy doing it. Have you ever been at a point where it wasn't that way? And how did you kind of make that decision to focus on making a dent in the universe over maybe more money?
Yeah. A couple thoughts on that. So I've always felt like, even though this is what's in the book, I have a slightly different take on the meaning of it, which is that there are lots of different sized worlds. Now, the universe, of course, like holds them all, let's say. But like, if you make a dent in your local neighborhood and you improve the lives of all your neighbors, like that's fulfilling and great. Like you don't need to change. Like the universe is a little bit too big of a word in a sense. I think it makes people feel like things have to be super grand to be worthwhile doing. And it's not really meant in that way. It's not like you need to make a mark that is so undeniable that everyone in the world knows that you're there. Like I would never say that that's a bar. I do think whatever you're doing there should be a reason for it existing. And if it didn't exist, it would be a little bit irritating to some people. Like, like it should be good in that it's not just like easily replaceable with some other thing that you just plug in this widget for that widget, whatever. So that's kind of what that sort of means. Like they'll notice if you're not there as a company, as a product. Obviously, individuals inside larger companies are more interchangeable than in smaller companies. I remember when I first got a job out of college, my first job was actually working for this guy named Keith. I was a web designer for him. It was just me and him, actually one other guy. There's three of us. And I realized that like just a few months in that the work, this is not quite the same thing, but it's similar. The work, I didn't have any motivation to do the work. And I realized personally that if my motivation is at zero, like I can't do it. Like I mean, look, if I had to do it, had to do it to survive, I would do it. But I'm like, there's other things I'm sure that I could be doing that I enjoy doing. So it wasn't about, and then I left that job and started doing freelance again. It was never a financial decision though. It was more like, I just don't want to do the work that I've been given here to do. And I simply like can't get up to do it. I just don't have the interest or the motivation. And like, then that's just not worth it for me, period. So like I moved back home for a while because I couldn't afford to live on my own for a minute because I didn't have a job. And then did some freelance work, finally saved up a little bit enough, and then got an apartment in Chicago so I went back home to live with my parents for a little bit, then got an apartment. And I realized like I'm making a lot less. I've got more rent to pay and the whole thing. Living in Chicago was more expensive than where I was at the time. And I'm making less, and I'm struggling to like get gigs because I was a freelancer before I was getting a paycheck, which is like you just get a paycheck. But like I was so much more into it because my motivation was like 100. And I realized just for myself that that's what I'm after, is finding things I'm really motivated to work on. And I find that the money takes care of itself. This has just been my experience, that the money will take care of itself. You're going to get what you're going to get, and you're going to have to adjust your lifestyle to whatever it is. But going to work and doing something you're not motivated to do is really, really hard. And I would take a lot less money to work on something I'm motivated to do than a lot more money to work on something I don't want to do. And that's what I sort of realized for myself. And I think that's guided me my whole career. I've never really thought much about money or like, if we do this, I'll have that much or anything like that. It's like, what do I want to do? How do I want to spend my 8-hour day, basically? And that's sort of taking care of itself. And again, I've been fortunate. Timing is right, luck, all the things, million reasons. I don't know why things worked out in the way they did. I can guess, I can tell stories about what I think it was. I don't really know for sure. But I do know that I've spent the last 25 of my years in my career pretty much working mostly on everything that I want to do. And that is the most satisfying part of it, not the financial reward that I've gotten.
Yeah, I think that's something I'm just putting together recently, because I think you kind of think to yourself like, well, work is work, and who really wants to be at work, right? And so it's normal to have, like you're talking about, zero motivation, because like, of course I'd rather be, at the beach or at a theme park or whatever. But having switched kind of from big tech to the startup where, there is more motivation, right? And yeah, I'm just realizing like, oh, that wasn't normal. That wasn't normal to have to, for like 80% of your cognitive energy to be going towards like convincing yourself that you could do this, right?
Right. I think this idea, you're right. Like I can push through. There's the version of I can push through when you're pushing through something you don't want to push through. And then there's the version of like, right now we're working on some new products, and like, there's some like big open questions. Like, are we going to figure this out? Like, are we going to get the right combination of things in place here? And I don't know, but like it's so much more fun to push through that, because like, I like what we're doing and I'm motivated to figure it out versus like just having to do it to get the paycheck. Everyone's different though. And some people are perfectly happy just going to work and doing whatever is asked of them. And that's just not how my makeup is. That's all. I'm just not made that way for whatever reason, for better or for worse. It's probably for worse in a lot of ways, because like, if I didn't do what I'm doing now, I might be very hard to employ, because it might be very hard to keep a job, or it'd be hard for me to do that. I got lucky in that I found something that pays well and I like doing it. But I have a really hard time with even in my current business, when there's something I need to do that I just do not want to do. It just needs to get done. Like, it's a slog to build up the momentum to do work I could do the work, but to do the work at a level that I'm satisfied at and proud of, because I have to be proud of the work I'm doing. that's the bar that's hard to clear. I can like push the keys and move the things and do the stuff, but like if it's just crap, like that's just even way worse, in fact. So anyway, that's been my experience so far.
So you and David DHH have had a partnership for a long time, and both of you have pretty strong personalities, at least publicly. How do you handle disagreements and core philosophy for what is the 37 Signals philosophy and things like this?
Like how do we decide? How do two people decide?
Yeah, like how did the two of you? Because
it emerges. So everything just emerges,
Okay.
and we each bring our own point of view to things, and luckily we have a lot of overlap. So what we do is very different. David's on the technical side, I'm on the design side. So we don't like interact on a day-to-day basis on the work, but we do interact on the business and how to run the business and how to do those things. And principles and whatever, it emerges. I mean, this is sort of, I don't think I wrote about this. I think I had this idea after ReWork, but to me, culture is just a moving average. It's not actually something you create. You don't decide to create it. It just is. Culture is what a company does. Culture is how people in the company treat each other. It is an emergent property of a bunch of people working together. And I don't care what you want it to be or what you say it is. Like, it is what it is. And I think that's ultimately true about principles and values as well. Like, the things that are important to you and the way you work, they just emerge ultimately. And if you are deceitful and lie all the time and cheat, like, I don't care what you think you're going to do. That just, if that's who you are, that's what you're going to do. And that's what's going to show up in the business. So for example, David and I, like, we both have an independent streak. Like, we want to run an independent business. We don't want anyone to have to tell us what to do. We don't want to have to ask permission of anybody, but we didn't sit down and say, we want to be independent. We just realized that we want to be independent, that we like what independence gives us. And whenever we've considered not being independent, it's just like anathema to us to think about like what it would be like to have to answer to somebody else or to ask someone's permission to do something. And then when we're able to do what we want to do, we're so grateful that we're independent, but we didn't sit down and mark these things out. So it's just, these things emerge and you recognize them. God, these are things that we believe. And some things you don't even know you believe until you act, and then you do them and you feel good about them in a certain way. And you're like, this is how I actually am. I really like this kind of thing or that kind of thing. And then you eventually can codify these things because they're repeated. It's not that they're written down. It's that this is what you do. This becomes your habit essentially. And then the company has its own habits. And then that's how we work and that's how we are. And they represent the things that we've done and the things that we do. So I'm more a fan of that approach than sitting down and trying to figure out like, what do we stand for? What do we believe? What are we going to do? I would say, like, it doesn't matter what you write down. What you do is what is, and like, just let that emerge. And if you're hopefully a good person, treat people well, care about quality, have pride in your work, like, the things that are going to emerge are going to be hopefully good things that lead you ultimately. But it's not a slip of paper that does that, and it's not something you sit down and decide, in my opinion. Yeah.
So you say it's a moving average.
Yeah.
And I agree. I've worked at companies where they have these written values, but I know what the day-to-day is like. And
right.
I don't think our real values are written down.
Well, like, you see, like, for example, we have written, just to interrupt, because it's
go for it.
You go to a rental car place.
Right.
And you look behind the counter and there's like, we treat our customers with respect. There's like 10 things that they do.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there like waiting to be helped. And like the person behind the counter doesn't give a shit. And the place is a fucking mess. And you're just like, I'm staring at this list of things that you are not.
Yeah.
Yet like someone in corporate wrote the things you're supposed to be. And it's just such a joke. It's just like such a complete joke. And so, kind of to your point, like, like I always think about it this way. Like if someone was to come in and ask someone who worked at the company what it was really like,
Right.
that's the truth. Whatever's written down doesn't matter. Ask someone what it's like. Ask a few people, because some people can have good days, bad days, whatever. Right? Get it. Ask 10 people who work at the company. Like that's what the company is.
Right.
That's it. That's what it is, and everybody inside knows it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I worked at an employer, which will go unnamed, but people probably know who it is, where their one of their stated values was to be Earth's best employer. At the same time, they were making a lot of like anti-employee moves that were really frustrating. And I was just kind of like, I would respect you more if you just ripped out this value and just said like, no, that's not our goal. That's not who we are. We're not trying to be Earth's best employer. We're trying to be the most ruthless employer or the most winningest employer or whatever.
It's also like a bar that you can't clear. Like, what does it mean to be the world's best employer? Like, right? What does it even mean? So it's like, it's those kind of platitudes that when you see those, you're like, yeah, no, I don't trust this company at all.
Right.
Actually.
Well, then, so it's a moving average, right? And then it's about what you do. But then how are you guiding that at scale? Or is your kind of, again, you guys are kind of not anti-scale, but it's not the path you've chosen. Is it just being ruthless in who you hire and only hiring the kind of people that fit that the company mold? I mean, how are you managing that?
Yeah, I think hiring is a huge part of it, obviously. And then just like leading and doing the things that you say you're going to do and delivering on the things you say you're going to deliver on. And if you say, our employees get to come up with any idea they want and do whatever they want and blah, 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 and then meanwhile you shoot every single thing down that people say, like that doesn't work either. So you just have to live the things. And I that's why I find like in some ways, it's similar. It's a weird parallel again, but similar like Ruby on Rails, or like everything we do, we've extracted. So Ruby on Rails was built from Basecamp. Basecamp is the first product. And then David wanted to reuse a bunch of the components and things that he wrote for Basecamp for another product. And so he extracted Ruby on Rails from the development work he did on Basecamp. He did not invent Ruby on Rails first and then use that to build Basecamp. It's an extraction. And so is like everything we're sort of talking about here is an extraction. It's like, what are you actually doing? And then what are the things you pull out of that become like the guideposts and the ideas? So for example, like we've had a slightly larger company. We don't want to have a larger company. We like a slightly smaller company. We have 60 some odd people right now. We like that size. So if we say that to our employees, like we like where we're at, and we go and hire 43 more people, it's like, that's incongruent with what we just said. So I think you have to be consistent with your statements or explain the change and be upfront and clear about it. And then just lead and live that way. That's how you do it. And things do change over time, which is the whole moving average idea. Like cultures do change, and that means they can get better and then get worse, which is an important notion to keep in mind, that you can't just write this thing down. It's not steady state. It's actually what's happening. So if people start to get short with each other and curt with each other and rude with each other, and they're not helpful anymore, that reflects itself in the culture. Maybe it was better 60 days ago than it is today. Something changed. We can change it back, or we can go down the wrong path still. But it represents what's happening in the short term, and that's all through like looking at what's actually, like, what are we actually doing on a day-to-day basis? What am I doing? What's David doing? If David and I are sitting out on the beach all day doing nothing, like that signals something too. If we're absent from company decisions, if we're absent from product development, if we're not involved in conversations, that signals something too. So you can't say like we're involved, we're leading, and then like be out on the sidelines and not saying anything and being on sabbatical for 8 months a year or something like that. Like people can tell, everyone knows. And one of the advantages of being a smaller business is that actions are more obvious. Everyone knows like who's contributing, what's happening, what people are doing. You can't really hide. And I think that's a really good side of small businesses is there's no hiding. It more accurately represents the outside shell that the public sees, more accurately represents what's actually happening on the inside, I think, than in a large company, which can sort of mask things, put out statements, put up long lists of BS values, on the wall. Smaller businesses, like people see through that pretty quickly. And I think they're more realistic in that way.
It reminds me of the Mark Twain quote that says, "If you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything."
Yeah.
And this, a lot of the theme that I've been picking up in our conversation today is that it's just this sort of honest, deliberate action, and then like understanding why you're doing the things that you're doing. Um, and I think you're right. Like I think this is probably common sense for most people in the world, and maybe those of us in tech are just so used to this reality distortion field that we get really mixed up and jaded, and just these simple truths are actually like, oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, I think we get caught up in part of the problem is in our industry. I think there's a narrative about like it's all about growth, it's all about getting as big as you can, it's all about money, it's all about investment, revenue, all these like top line things, and you just people get caught up in it, and you rarely hear people talking about profit. Now you're starting to hear more about that because like people need to make money to stay in business. You're actually, interestingly enough, starting to hear about smaller teams again. I mean, it's in a context of AI, but whatever, it's still like smaller teams are actually pretty good. They can be very efficient. They can move very quickly. And some of these things are coming around again, which I think is a good thing. So I don't know. I think, again, I try not to pay much attention, frankly, to the narratives, and just stay focused on like what we need to do. Because my general feeling too is like when it comes to like competition and whatever, it's like, you can't control anybody else. You really only compete against your own costs, is how I tend to look at it. And there's plenty of market for most people, for most products, for most companies. As long as you keep your costs low and you keep your company tight, you can carve out a really good little niche for yourself, or a big niche, or a huge business, or small, and whatever. But you can make these things work if you don't get ahead of yourself and focus on the wrong things, and sort of get stars in your eyes and think that it's just about how much money you've raised and how big you're going to be and how much you're worth and what your valuation is. Like those things have nothing to do with making great products. And I think just, if that's what you hear, that's what you start to compete with.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of people feel inadequate. It's like, well, I can't, they're worth 20. How'd they become worth 15 billion? I'm only worth whatever, nothing. And it's like, don't feel bad. You got a great $7 million business. That's an amazing thing. Do you know how lucky you are to have a $7 million business? It's incredible. So it's a shame, I think, that people like get carried away with big, and they should recognize how lucky they might be, even if they're smaller.
You ever read Slow Productivity by Cal Newport?
I've not read that one. No, I've read a couple of the other books Cal's written, and I'm familiar with his point of view.
Yeah. I mean, it's very, very similar to your philosophy. And we read it last year. I think it made #1 on my books for last year. It was great.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I mean, he's
awesome.
great. Cal's been on this tip for a long time, and I mean, he's deeply into it. I guess he's a researcher as well. So he's like really scientific about this. I'm just like, spewing stuff from my gut here.
But, hey, so are we.
Yeah. But I think there's just, I mean, I'm a big fan of trusting your gut and intuition, and running a business that way as well, by the way, which is making it up as you go. And which is probably the name of our next book, Making It Up As You Go, actually. And figuring things out in real time, and not being worried about that or being afraid of that. But yeah, Cal, I would highly recommend. I mean, pretty much everything he's written and said. He's also just nice to listen to as well. Like he did some good interviews with Sam Harris. I think he had a couple.
Okay, I'll check those out.
I think Sam's he did one with Sam. It might have been Tristan Harris instead. I think I might be mixing them up, but I think Cal Newport did. Anyway, he's great.
Well, I guess in that vein, we always like to ask our authors at the end of the interview if they have any books they'd recommend. I mean, that can be fiction, nonfiction, technical, non-technical, whatever you think the audience might enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, I've read a couple. So it's funny. I never read fiction until last year.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I just I always had this thing like nonfiction, like the world is so interesting. Like the real world is so interesting. Why would I spend any limited time that I have, like on something that isn't true or something? I don't know. That was my stupid explanation, right? And then like,
do you watch movies? I got to ask that.
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
okay. So
of course, but like I'm kind of a slow reader, so like it's actually a pretty big commitment for me to like pick up a book, and so I'm like, I'd rather learn about the real world, and that was my thing. Whatever. Of course, storytelling is in the real world, but anyway, So someone's like, you should read this book by Richard Powers called The Understory or The Overstory. Overstory, Understory. I'm trying to remember now what it's called. I think it's called Overstory, actually. Richard Powers. Yes, Overstory. Blew my mind. Exceptionally good, interesting, incredibly beautiful prose, incredible story. It's also about the natural world, so it sort of scratched my my nonfiction itch also,
Cool.
even though it's a fictional story. Just outstanding book. It floored me. Just absolutely incredible. And then I picked up another book of his called Bewilderment, which blew me away even more. And it's kind of close to home. It's about a father and a son, and it's an extraordinarily beautiful and sad and hopeful, interesting, incredible book. So I read those two last year. I want to shout out those because Richard Powers, I just love his work. And then another book I read recently is called Orbital. Are you familiar with this book?
I don't think so.
It's super interesting. I forget the woman who wrote it, what her name is.
So is it Samantha Harvey?
That's it. Yep.
Okay.
So it's a really interesting, strange book. It's about these astronauts that are basically circling the Earth, and it's just like there's kind of like no plot, sort of. Each it's like a number of short essays, basically, which cover a certain amount of distance around the planet, basically. And it's just very beautiful. It's beautifully written. It's very unusual. There's a chapter or two or essay or two which are like some of the most beautiful words I've ever written or ever read, strung together in an essay. That sort of like goes far afield from the book itself. It's just a gorgeous book. I mean, by the way, the Powers book, the Overstory, was Pulitzer Prize winning book. So I'm not like picking out like obscure books. Like these are great books, but there's a lot of prize winning books. But anyway, Orbital, Bewilderment, and the Overstory are three books I'd highly recommend.
Cool.
I'm currently reading Area 51 by Annie Jacobson, which is I just heard her on Tyler Cowen's podcast, Conversations with Tyler, talking about a more recent book she wrote called Nuclear War: A Scenario. And
Yes.
and so she was talking about this other book she wrote called Area 51. I'm like, oh, I know, I've heard of that. Fascinating, incredible, interesting book. All about the history of Area 51. There's some controversy in the book whether or not some stuff is true or not, but like really interesting, kind of very different kind of. I mean, this is kind of going back to nonfiction, sort of in a sense. But that's what I'm reading right now and really enjoying that.
Cool.
I've also I'll give you two other shout outs. Let me just pull up my Audible and make sure I get this right. One of my favorite books of all time actually is just called The Manual by Epictetus. It's a Stoic, 60 pages or something, 65 pages. And I find it to be the most profound 60 pages of anything I've probably ever read. And it's like so straightforward and simple. And each page is like basically like an essay, kind of like what we've written, but like some of them are really short, like a paragraph. Anyway, it's an ancient text basically, but you translate it. I read it many times a year. It just really grounds me. Really enjoy that.
Very cool.
So I'll just stop there. That's enough. But yeah, I think I highly recommend that. And you can read that in 90 minutes, probably. Nice. Yeah, it's a quick read. I like quick reads.
Yeah, sometimes we grade books on a scale on the podcast, like, you know, we're recommending if you should read it or not. Like, this book was like 100 pages. Read it. You know, like anyone can. I mean,
like almost any 100 page. Like, yeah, there's many. Like Derek Sievers has some wonderful books. You know, Derek.
I know the name, but I couldn't tell you.
I think is this extraordinary book he wrote. I believe it's called How to Live. So I'll just give you this. He self-publishes his books. The premise of this book I absolutely love, and I love his writing style. But the premise of the book is every other chapter disagrees with the previous chapter.
Oh, cool.
And it's a way to look at the world. And it's awesome. Like one would be like, do the biggest thing you could ever imagine. The next one's like, you know, do just the smallest thing you can think of today. And like, just like totally opposites. And then some things are more disagree with each other a little bit more than that. Those are more like opposites, but some are actually in conflict with each other. It's just a beautiful way to look at the world and to think through things, and to also realize like there's no one size fits all. And it's just beautifully written. And his stuff is really, really quick, super fast, short books. Really well considered books. Great writing style. Very straightforward. I really like his stuff too.
Well, hey, thanks a ton, Jason.
Yeah, it was fun.
We always like filling out the backlog. And yeah, thanks so much for stopping by. We loved ReWork. So happy we could have you on the podcast.
Thank you.
Anything you want to plug before you leave?
Nothing to plug.
There we go.
I mean, you can check out our stuff.
Basecamp.
Yeah, use Basecamp. Use hey.com. Check out our stuff. Yeah.
Great. Well, as always on the podcast, listeners, you can find us at contact@bookoverflow.io, on Twitter @BookOverflowPod. I'm on Twitter @Carter Morgan. Nathan's newsletter, Functionally Impaired, is at functionallyimperative.com. Jason, thanks a ton for stopping by. Such a pleasure to chat with you.
Likewise.
And we'll see you around next time,
Thanks, guys.
listeners. See ya.
See you around.